Guatemala, the Supreme Electoral Tribunal has rejected any attempt to interfere in the elections, following a raid by the Public Prosecutor's Office on the headquarters of the electoral authorities. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that his government is considering pausing its participation in the United Nations facilitated grain deal until the food and fertilizer exports are unblocked. The summit of neighboring countries of Sudan took place in Egypt, where they discussed the alternative to put an end to the internal conflict and address the humanitarian crisis. Hello, welcome to From the South. I'm Alene Brosabal from the TSE studios in Havana, Cuba. We begin with the news. Stay with us. In Guatemala, the Supreme Electoral Tribunal has rejected any attempt to interfere in the elections following a raid by the Public Prosecutor's Office on the headquarters of the electoral authorities. The Special Prosecutor's Office for the Fight Against Impunity reported that an inspection, search, and seizure of evidence had been carried out. The prosecutor's office explained that this was due to the complaints against the Semilla political party movement, alleging that the citizen had illegally joined the party. In this context, the Supreme Electoral Court confirmed the participation of the presidential binomial of Semilla and UNE in the election. The raid came after a judge requested the suspension of the seat movement legal status, while minutes later the Supreme Electoral Tribunal confirmed the organization and its candidate, Fernando Arevalo, as participants in the second round of the elections, along with Sandra Torres. The leadership of the political movement stressed that the order of the Seventh Court was based on an alleged falsification of signatures that occurred in 2019. The lawyer of the political group underlined the provisions of Article 92 of the electoral law. No political organization can be suspended once the electoral process had begun. On Wednesday, Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva will sign a bill to reduce housing deficit. Lula da Silva will ratify the bill approved by the National Congress, which creates the new My House, My Life program. And official sources indicated that the signing ceremony will be held at the Planalto Palace, seat of the executive power in Brasilia, with the participation of the Minister of Cities, Jader Filho, among other authorities. Among the main changes in the new Minha Casa, Minha Vida are the increase in the income threshold to participate in the program, rate reductions, and better financing conditions. A U.S. union represented some 160,000 actors and other media workers sacked AFTRA, calling its members to participate in mass strikes due to the failure of negotiations with major films and TV studios. According to a statement from the organization released on July 13, the alliance of motion picture and television producers comprised of Amazon, Apple, Disney, NBC Universal, Netflix, Paramount, Sony, Warner Bros., Discovery, and other media giants, after 4 weeks of negotiations, refused to cooperate with the union and to include in the new contracts the points they consider key. The deadline for renewal was July 12. The companies refused to compromise on some issues and stonewall on others. In a subsequent statement, they revealed the issues that had led to strong disagreements with the film and TV companies, the influence of streaming platforms, and artificial intelligence on actor salaries.
Because the AMPTP remains unwilling to offer a fair deal on key issues essential to protecting the livelihoods of working actors and performers, SAG-AFTRA's national board unanimously voted to issue a strike order against the studios and streaming.
Members of the Screen Actors Guild joined screenwriters on the picket lines outside the Warner Bros. Discovery offices in New York to join the strike for a failure claim for income.
It is painful and it's necessary. They are making so much money, and they say that we are not approaching this issue fairly. When the head of Disney makes $45 million a year, and we're asking for a living wage, I think the unreasonable finger can be pointed in their direction. And no one wants to go on strike, but there's just no way we can proceed.
I think it's important for us to be compensated for our work, especially in these newer times. When newer times hit, things need to be updated, things need to be adjusted and rearranged, and I think it's right.
When profits are being put over people, that's not right. It's not the right thing to do. So I think what we're doing here is we're trying to express and demonstrate some of the power that we have as people on a collective basis.
Let's take a short break, but remember you can join us on TikTok at teleSUR English, where you'll find news in different formats, new dates, and more. All the studies coming up. Stay with us. Welcome back. Russian President Vladimir Putin said on Thursday that his government is considering pausing its participation in the United Nations facilitated grain deal until the food fertilizer exports are unblocked. The Russian leader explained that none of the promises made to Moscow under the agreement have been fulfilled, adding that the deal has been a one-way street case. Formerly known as the Black Sea Initiative, the agreement between Moscow and Kiev was mediated by the UN and Turkey back in the summer of 2022. The deal was accompanied by a Russian UN memorandum whose goal included allowing Russia's major agricultural lender, Rosabanka, back onto the SWIFT payment system, enable deliveries of spare parts for agricultural machinery, restarting the Tolyaty-Odessa ammonia pipeline, sorting out insurance and logistics, as well as on raising Russian assets. Russian President Vladimir Putin commented on the global security implications of the possible integration of Ukraine into NATO and referred to the constant supply of weapons from the West to Ukraine.
As for Ukraine's membership in NATO, we have repeatedly talked about it. It obviously poses a threat to Russia's security. And in fact, the reason for the special military operation, one of the reasons, is Ukraine's membership in NATO. I am sure that this will not increase the security of Ukraine itself, and in general, it will make the world much more vulnerable and will lead to additional tension on the world stage. With regards to the supply of arms, of various weapons, we see how much hope was spent on the supply of fairly long-range missiles. Well, yes, they do damage, but nothing critical happens in the combat zone.
UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres said on Thursday that the controversial cluster munitions pledged by the United States to Ukraine must not be used on the battlefield due to its risks for civilians after the conflict is over. Speaking to the press following a meeting with Bulgarian Prime Minister Alexander Jigra, Guterres said that while he understands that neither Russia nor the United States or Ukraine are party to the 2008 Oslo Convention banning cluster bombs, he considers the convention is a very important instrument and that he stands by his position to the use of such weapons. The United States government said last week it could deliver cluster bombs to Ukraine despite concerns over the long-term risk posed to civilians. The Kremlin has said it will take countermeasures if the weapon is deployed by Ukraine against its troops.
I have always supported the international convention banning these cluster bombs. That's my position and I stand by it. Naturally, I understand that neither the United States, nor the Russian Federation, nor Ukraine have signed the convention. But from my point of view, the convention has been a very important instrument. These bombs must not be used on the battlefield.
Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi arrived in France on Thursday for a two-day official visit to a European nation. The Indian head of government was welcomed at Orly's International Airport by his French counterpart Elizabeth Borne, with whom he met later on to discuss issues of bilateral and mutual interests. Addressing the Indian community of La Scène Musicale in Paris, Modi referred to India's G20 presidency and affirmed that the capability and the role of the countries is changing fast within the international scenario, moving towards a new world order. The Indian Prime Minister also called on French Senate President Gerald Larcher and is expected to hold wide-ranging talks with President Emmanuel Macron and join him for the Bastille Day parade as a guest of honor.
A better society can forge a better world. In this spirit, India and France are fighting the challenges of the 21st century. That's why, in this important time, the India-France strategic partnership has gained more importance.
On Thursday, the Cuban President Miguel Díaz-Canel arrived in Portugal to carry out an official state visit that would allow the expansion of relations between the two countries. The visit of the Cuban leader follows an invitation from his Portuguese counterpart, Marcelo Rebelo de Sousa, and will last until July 16th. Díaz-Canel pointed out that it will be an excellent opportunity to expand our historic relations. According to the schedule, the Cuban president will hold exchanges with the highest authorities of the Iberian country. He will also hold talks with personalities from the world of cultures and business and with members of the movements of solidarity with the island. In the United Kingdom, doctors staged a 5-day general strike to demand better pay in the face of rising inflation. Members of the British Medical Association have announced a 35% pay rise to the authorities. Doctors complained that they have suffered a 26% real terms pay cut over the last 15 years. The mobilization comes after the government announced a 6% pay rise, which they say is unacceptable given that the inflation is running at 8.7%. According to 27-year-old Dr. Arjan Sain, who is taking part in a picket outside London's University Hospital, his colleagues are planning to emigrate to other countries where they feel the authorities care about their doctors. We have a second short break coming up, but before we invite you to visit our YouTube channel at TSE English, there you'll be able to rewatch our interviews, top stories, special broadcastings, and more. Hit the subscribe button and activate the notification bell to stay up to date on the world's more recent events. Final short break, don't go away. Welcome back. The summit of neighboring countries of Sudan took place in Egypt, where they discussed alternatives to put an end to the internal conflicts and address the humanitarian crisis. The meeting was organized by the Egyptian President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi and took place after the failure of the talks in the Saudi city of Jeddah, following the conflict that is shaking several regions of Khartoum since April. The delegation have agreed to promote an international resolution to stop the fighting and strengthen mechanisms to prevent a humanitarian crisis from spreading in the region. The conflict in Sudan has resulted in more than 3,000 deaths and more than 6,000 wounded, and has also forced more than 738,000 people to flee their homes to neighboring countries. Within the framework of the celebration of the summit of neighboring countries of Sudan, the President of Egypt, Abdel Fattah el-Sisi, called on leaders and organizations to find a solution to the crisis in the African country.
We are asking parties to the conflict to stop escalation and start serious negotiations without delay, aiming for an immediate ceasefire. Secondly, we are asking all Sudanese parties to facilitate access to humanitarian aid and guarantee a safe corridor for the aid. We affirm full respect for Sudan's sovereignty, unity, and territorial integrity, non-interference in its internal affairs, and dealing with the current conflict as an internal matter without the interference of external parties.
In this context, the Prime Minister of Ethiopia, Abiy Ahmed, and the President of South Sudan, Salva Kiir Mayardit, also called for a ceasefire and the delivery of humanitarian aid for the thousands of victims.
Calls for, firstly, an unconditional and indefinite ceasefire. Secondly, immediate delivery of humanitarian assistance to all beneficiaries affected by the violent conflict.
Our attempt to help find solution to this conflict should be aimed at achieving the following. 1. Sustainable ceasefire. 2. Sustainable cessation of hostilities. 3. Delivery of humanitarian aid.
On Thursday, the president of Zimbabwe, Emerson Mnangagwa, urged nations targeted by Western sanctions to band together as he hosted the leader of fellow international leader, Iran. President Ibrahim Raisi arrived for the last leg of the first Africa tour by an Iranian leader in 11 years, on a tour aimed at easing the Islamic Republic's international isolation. Raisi is the highest-profile leader to visit Zimbabwe in the thick of an election campaign for a closely watched August 23 presidential and parliamentary votes. Western countries retort that the measures target specific individuals accused of graft and human rights abuses rather than the whole country. Raisi has already been to Kenya and Uganda this week, holding talks with the counterparts William Ruto and Yoweri Museveni.
Signed a record of 12 MOUs. I have no doubt, and I assure you, my dear brother, that on our side in Zimbabwe, we shall religiously follow up these MOUs for the benefit. It is critically important that we, the victims of Western sanctions, are talking to each other. The authors of these sanctions would not want us to talk to each other, but because we are both victims, it is critically important that we show them that we are united.
India confirms its interest in consolidating relations with Syria and increasing its contribution to the recovery of the Arab country in the current post-war period. This interest was expressed during the visit of the Indian Minister of State for Foreign Affairs to Damascus on Thursday. Let's see the detail from our correspondent Hisham Wanus.
India believes that it is important to continue cooperation with Syria in the health and education sectors and advocates the development of bilateral relations in the economic sphere. This was stated by the Indian minister during his meetings with the Syrian president and prime minister. The meetings aimed at identifying the most vital sectors of cooperation between Damascus and New Delhi and ways to expand and consolidate this collaboration for the benefit of the peoples of both friendly nations.
India has always supported the Syrian people, especially during the period of unrest and crisis, and we will continue to support the Syrian people through the aid we offer in the field of development, also through the training courses and university scholarships to Syrian students, and we will also seek and explore ways to improve and develop bilateral relations in the different areas between the two countries.
The Indian minister also went on a tour of the new generation Syrian Indian Center of Excellence and was informed about the educational courses offered by this academic institution to develop the skills of Syrian engineers and technicians in the scientific, technical, and technological fields, the software industry, and information technology, a contribution that Syrians consider of vital importance to break the Western blockade and advance in the recovery of their country.
We are optimistic about the cooperation between Syria and India, which has expressed its support for the Syrian people and the Syrian government over the past years, and we are sure that this Syrian Indian Center of Excellence, after this visit of the Indian minister, will play a very important role in the work towards the recovery of the country.
The main objective of this cooperation is to share the Indian experiences in the areas of information, technology, and communications with Syria in order to advance the country's recovery in this field, in addition to providing the country with the necessary technology for training and all the necessary equipment to accomplish this task under international cooperation laws, including computers, technological equipment, and trainers.
In addition to the scientific field, India funds and implements humanitarian projects to support the Syrian people in the aftermath of war and the blockade. The joint Syrian-Indian project launched in 2019 to provide more than 1,000 prostheses for lower limbs and the necessary equipment to war-wounded and physically disabled people from all governorates of Syria is a sign of the fraternal and historic relations between the governments and peoples of both nations.
Hisham Wannous, TeleSUR, Damascus, Syria.
We have come to the end of this brief. You can find this and many other studies on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Telegram, and TikTok. For TeleSUR English, I'm Ana Rosabal. Thank you for watching.